All right, hey, I'm Jeff Baumgartner with Light Reading, and we're here in Los Angeles at the Mobile Congress LA event. I'm pleased to be joined by Mariam Sorond with CableLabs. Thanks for being with us here today.
Thank you, Jeff, for having me.
Sure thing. Now, you and I, we caught up in April, right? When CableLabs introduced the Convergence Council and the Mobile Convergence Committee, a couple of groups. You walked through it with me a little bit, but I was wondering if you can kind of update everybody on the goals of those groups, the focus of those groups, and kind of what the genesis was for them.
Yeah, absolutely. I'd be happy to do that. So, we try to see if we can become a catalyst for the industry in terms of convergence. And one of the first things we thought of doing is bringing the industry together at CableLabs. So that's why we formed an operator group called the Mobile Convergence Committee, and then a vendor group called Convergence Council that work very closely together. And the goal here is to create scale, to find common ground, to find platforms for true convergence. And convergence is not anything new, but it's just never been done, in my opinion, at this scale. And kind of first bringing the industry together to say, what do we do? Asking the right questions, putting the right frameworks together, considering the right use cases, prioritizing all of that. So you can go to the CableLabs website. We have a name called Connexus for it, and there's a lot more information, including interviews with some of the members that you can see.
Okay. We talked back in April. Again, it's just been a few months now. Is there, as far as like potential outcomes and so forth, will there be anything related to like standards or best practices, or what kind of tangible output do you expect to come out of this?
Yeah, in really a few months, so really fast timing, we're able to actually start talking about two things. One of them is the framework of the group. And we discussed this a lot around, okay, why are we here and why does this matter? And what kinds of things are we going to work on? So we got in a sort of an understanding around things like, for example, we have to make sure that it either is giving you a user experience that's personalized, as seamless, or that convergence enables a new service, potentially a differentiated service, or that it creates some economic or operational efficiency. So these were kind of the pillars we discussed. So we've done that, which I think was significant, because when you get these kinds of influencers and really amazing people together, you need to kind of find their common ground. And the second thing we worked on were use cases, because that's going to be a driver of everything, right? If you don't have that practical use case on why convergence matters and what is it going to change, then you're really just talking a bunch of technology and a bunch of specifications, right? So I think those were the first two major things we've done in a short amount of time, and I'm happy with where the group is with respect to that.
Right. When you're talking about use cases, we're here at the event. There's been a lot of discussions about new use cases for 5G, for example. From the discussions you've had so far, any new use cases or surprising use cases yet that you've kind of come across, or anybody that's kind of surfaced through any of these groups?
We're not ready to go public with a lot of it yet, because we want to make sure that everybody's on board with these, and that actually these use cases will make a difference. And that difference is whether in terms of a service for an operator or something for a vendor that they can really kind of invest in. But I can tell you that that the use cases are ranging from a series of things, and very similar to what you're seeing here at the show. When you talk about things like a Mac, and edge compute, and enabling edge native applications, you can't just be talking about only wireless networks. You got to think about the wired network. So all of these things: mobile, wired, wireless, even satellite. You really have to kind of throw all of these in as connections and connectivity options when you really truly want to enable some of the use cases that you're seeing being talked about. So similarly, we're going after the ones that really need this connectivity space to converge, and that's where it becomes interesting.
You said it up front that convergence, the concept of converged networks, converged services, has been talked about for a long time. It's nothing new, but sort of you can expand on a little bit and kind of why this is becoming increasingly important for the quote-unquote cable industry, right? Because you have a lot of cable operators that are MNOs. Some are doing mobile services through an MVNO deal. A lot of them have their hands in a lot of different places on the network. So when you kind of bring it all together, why is it so important right now for the industry to really focus on this convergence question?
I mean, several reasons. One of them is the reason why it's different right now is because of all these enablers. So the decoupling of hardware and software, you hear around this show around ORAN, every corner there's ORAN, right? I mean, so you're talking about open interfaces, you're talking about disaggregated components, you're talking about open infrastructure and architecture. So now that the technology enablers are there, think about really, you could really leverage this for true convergence, meaning that ideally you'd have a single hardware platform and all of these different access capabilities are sitting on top of that same hardware platform. So whether that's your DU and CU in the 5G world, or whether that's your CMTS and the virtual CMTS in sort of the cable world, or whether it's Wi-Fi, all of these can now truly come together in a software sense. And then imagine all those things that it creates, like how you do automation across, how do you do, all of this zero touch that's being talked about. So the enablers make a difference, right, in that sense. And I think that's why this is the right time to kind of go back and really push the envelope to truly get that going. But of course, you also have some low-hanging fruit, until that happens and you truly get access convergence. There's things you can do with convergence as simple as just building platforms, and some folks are even talking about that right now.
Okay. And now you kind of outlined some of the initial focus and kind of what you've been working on. 2022 is not that far around the corner, but as you kind of look ahead, are there some specific goals you can talk about yet for either of these groups, or kind of the kind of your priorities for them, going forward right now?
Yeah. So, we went through the frameworks, we went through use cases, we're going through prioritization of use cases to be able to kind of pick a few, because, we have to kind of create focus. And I think next year has to be around creating the architectures, right? And then after that, going into proofs of concepts and then industry evangelizations. I mean, we really need to break some of these barriers also between the vendors and operators, and that's why if you look at this, we're starting to do that, especially with the Convergence Council. The vendors that are getting in the room, they're from all across, they're from various groups, and those conversations become very interesting. So now the focus has been created, so really I think once we go into the architecture phase next week, there's going to be some really good stuff happening.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting when you talk about bringing everybody together like that, because one of the things I've kind of noticed out here at this event, we've had a few times when they're talking about things like Open RAN or other pieces of the 5G arena where you're talking about collaboration and scale and a lot of things that the cable industry has kind of been known for. Even DOCSIS came up. They were trying to correlate ORAN or Open RAN with DOCSIS just in terms of at least from the cost side, but you need everybody to come together. So it's been interesting to kind of see you try to bring that same sense of collaboration around mobile convergence. So there's maybe some lessons that the cable industry can provide these guys?
Yeah, I mean, great question. Yeah, Jeff, as you know, I came from the mobile and wireless industry 2 years ago. Mm-hmm. And one of the first things I noticed, actually being a big fan of ORAN in my previous life, but one of the big things I noticed is that cable has been doing this architectures for a very long time. These open architectures have been developed. So absolutely, I think there's a lot to learn from the cable industry on how they created this, how simple it is, how nimble things can be, and I look forward to kind of converging these two together. And the mobile industry can look at that and not be so hesitant. Right, because there's a hesitation with adopting ORAN on the mobile side. There's a hesitation by some of the operators, and some of the vendors, right? So they could look at this and say, okay, well, it's been working this great, let's try to embrace ORAN, and then in this way we also get to converge both platforms.
Okay. Now, last thing I wanted to ask you about was the Mobile Convergence Committee, right? And you have at least when we checked back with you in April or so, that there was a big focus on CableLabs members. Obviously a lot of them are cable operators, but they're, like we said, they're MNOs, they have MVNO deals, they're in the mobile business. And I think you talked about the ambition wanting to go wider than that and kind of get beyond the CableLabs members. So has some of that activity been going on? Have you been having those discussions? What was kind of in the progress there?
Absolutely. I think it was great that we decided to have a few open seats for non-members, and we actually filled one. In fact, some of these members are here in the show if you run into them. Iyad Tarazi, CEO of Federated Wireless, they're not a CableLabs member, he's a part of the MCC, brings a lot of value. We also have the Convergence Council folks here if you want to talk about to them. Intel's Carolyn Chen, Sean Hockel from Microsoft, John Baker, and a few others. So we're still wanting to actually fill the 3 spots with non-members. And I think we're discussing definitely offline on who would be appropriate. We really need open mind. We need people to come with an open mind to this discussion. We need people who want to break these barriers, want to sit behind a table and figure this out, because I really think it's going to make a difference for the industry. So we're still on that path.
All right. Well, look, thank you again for all your updates and insight. Look forward to staying in touch how things progress. But thanks for joining us today.
Yeah, thank you, Jeff.
All right.